1960, 11 years after Brown versus Board of Education. That spring, the county faced pressure to desegregate from the local NAACP, which filed a lawsuit against New Kent County in March 1965. The county also faced pressure from what was the predecessor of the U.S. Department of Education, which threatened federal funding, the removal of federal funding from the county should it not desegregate. As a result, New Kent County began school desegregation in the fall of 1965 under a freedom of choice plan. The admission of the first African-American students that fall brought about a variety of challenges as well as some opportunities in the county. 3 years later, in the spring of 1968, the United States Supreme Court decision handed down its decision in Green versus New Kent County, a unanimous decision that placed the burden of school desegregation on the school districts themselves, not on the shoulders of African-American parents and their children as it had been under freedom of choice. Full integration in New Kent County came the following year, starting in the fall of 1969, after a one-year delay. To my left, we have 5 panelists that are here that experienced this time period and this story firsthand. I'm going to introduce them briefly and we'll begin. We're going to have our panelists speak for, looking at the clock, approximately 45 minutes or so, and then we will be happy to take questions afterwards as well. To my immediate left, and if you could raise your hand as I introduce you, Rusty Curle. Rusty attended New Kent School, the all-white New Kent School, and graduated in 1969, the year that integration began. Mr. Curle returned to New Kent High School as an athletics coach from 1973 to 1986. To his left, Betty Burrell. In the summer of 1966, Betty's parents enrolled her in the Head Start program at the all-black George W. Watkins Elementary School. Starting in the fall of 1966, she attended the formerly all-white New Kent School from 1st through 3rd grades, 1966 to 1969. Her first year in a fully integrated school was in the 4th grade. To Mrs. Burrell's left, Anthony Green. Anthony Green was educated at the all-black George W. Watkins School until his parents enrolled him in the formerly all-white New Kent School in 1965 when he entered the 4th grade. His father, Dr. Calvin C. Green, was lead plaintiff in the Green versus New Kent County lawsuit. To Mr. Green's left, Ms. Linda Holmes Taylor first went to New Kent School in 1965 in the 8th grade under the Freedom of Choice Plan. Mrs. Taylor graduated in 1970 in the first totally integrated class. Mrs. Taylor was also the first Black homecoming queen after the New Kent County schools were integrated. And to Mrs. Taylor's left, Mr. Larry Woodson was educated at the all-black George W. Watkins School until his parents enrolled him in the formerly all-white New Kent School in 1965 when he entered the 9th grade. Mr. Woodson graduated in 1969. Panelists, if you would begin, please, by introducing yourselves briefly. Tell us a little bit of your connections to New Kent County. And if it's relevant to you, please describe your educational experience in New Kent County as well. We can proceed in whichever order you'd like. Maybe start at the far end, Larry, work our way across. You can move those microphones as well.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, I'm Larry Woodson. I entered in New Kent High School in 1965. After leaving George W. Watkins, which I didn't really want to because I had a lot of friends and family members there, but my parents said you had to go, so I didn't have a choice. However, I will say that as a result of a lot of leaders and support from the county, I didn't have a hard time in the beginning because my church, leaders in the county, support groups and family members was behind me. The part about actually leaving, it was very, very difficult from day one until basically I graduated, relative to the violence, the things that were happening to the county itself. It was very, very difficult to just study, understand. I did well in school. I always played sports, and but I do have a lot more information to talk about. I don't know how long you want me to go that far, but anyway.
Yeah, you can take a few minutes and then we'll work our way down the aisle.
Yeah, the biggest thing was for me, I knew I could compete. I just wanted to be accepted. That was number one. The school itself, the environment, I was hoping that day one, I would get there and have a formal introduction with the guidance counselors, the teachers, get a lay of the land and the school and all. That did not happen. It was it's like punishment. The first time the bus came to pick us up, everything was isolated. Bus driver didn't speak. Walked on the school bus. There was a place for my sister and I. We had to sit isolated. The first day, the young ladies on the bus would either tip up behind you and take fingernail polish or white out and paint the back of your neck. And by the time you wipe it off, you couldn't get the stuff off your hands. The N-word was prevalent. I mean, it doesn't matter what you did, where you went, what have you. Got into the class. I remember the first teacher, she said, look, I don't care how smart you are, and I don't care what you do. The best thing you can do or a grade you will get out of this class is a C. And she addressed us initially by the N-word. Long story short, I will say this. The whole time I was there, in my opinion, we were the best in class and the best on the field of athletic competition. Proof positive, we had the first African-American who was the valedictorian and moved on to West Point. That was a huge accomplishment for a 4-year stint. Our athletic career, we were undefeated in baseball, and there's a whole another story to that about the activities as well. Assemblies, when you went to the assemblies on Friday, nobody would want to sit near you or behind you or beside you. Cafeteria, same thing, you were always isolated. I've had some great dark moments in the county with cross burnings, Molotov cocktails, before you get on the bus, that kind of thing. And it was just one, I was nearly afraid, but at the same time, I was praying each and every day. And thanks for the leadership in the county and the support groups in the county and friends and family that was telling me every day, you can make it, you can make it. So I do have a lot more information to talk about, but I'll pass the mic right now.
Mrs. Taylor.
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Taylor, and I graduated in 1970. I was with the first group that attended New Kent High School. At that time, there was no middle school. So you had grades K through 7. That was elementary school. I started in the 8th grade. That was considered high school. The night before school started, I remember my father receiving a phone call from Dr. Green, telling him, I saw my dad take the phone and go into the bedroom so we couldn't hear, but I heard what he said. He said, George, you're going to need to meet the bus tomorrow morning with Linda because the Klan is burning a cross on the school grounds now. So that was the night before school started. My father went to the bus stop with me, like Larry. We were always told to show your best manners, good morning, good afternoon, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Got on the bus. Bus driver looked straight ahead. There was Anthony Burrell was the other person on the bus, the other Black student on the bus. She said, I will not have any race mixing on my bus. Boys on one side, girls on the other. Now, Anthony was an elementary student, probably first or second grade. I was 8th grade. So we did as we were told. She drove about 1.5 miles to the nearest service station, and she got off the bus, and we could hear her. We could hear what she said. And she said, I told you all I was not hauling any N-words up and down the road. There are 2 on my bus. I'm going to sit here until you send someone else. So that is exactly what happened, which meant you were afraid anyway. You were nervous and you were late going to school that first day. We got to school not really knowing what to expect. My first class, I know this was not in the curriculum, but the teacher said, it was my history class, and she said, today we're going to learn about the savages of Africa. So that was my first class. You learned quickly not to go into the bathroom alone. You learned quickly not to go to the water fountain without having a Black person behind you, because if not, they pushed your head down. You had water all over your face, all over your clothes. It was freedom of choice, but it was not a choice that I would have made. Like Larry, my parents filled out applications for my brothers and for me, but I was the only one that was accepted. I think they accepted more girls than boys. And I mean, I cried constantly. It was a dark time for me and for all of us that were there. And everyone was not bad, but the overwhelming majority let us know that that was not something, we were not welcome. They didn't want us there, teachers and the students. A quick story I'm going to tell. The year that we completely integrated and came together, we were the New Kent Rebels. Not a name you wanted to associate with. We were New Kent Rebels, part of the Confederate flag on the uniform of the school. So when schools integrated, they brought everyone together from Watkins down to New Kent, down to New Kent. So we voted for a new team name. We became the New Kent Trojans. Yes. New colors. And that was the first year that we had a valedictorian and salutatorian. We're both African-American. Mm-hmm. But quick story, my beloved cousin and classmate Cynthia Lewis at the time, we were in charge, I can't believe it, but we were in charge of selecting the speaker for our graduation. We went to the principal's office and asked if we could use the phone. Can you imagine that? We asked if we could use the phone. We went in his office. We called a lawyer in Richmond, looked it up in the yellow pages. Young folks won't know anything about that, but we looked it up in the yellow pages, found this lawyer's name that we both came up with. And we got his office, asked his secretary if we could speak to him. Yes, he came on the phone. We spoke to him and we said, I'm Linda Holmes, this is Cynthia Lewis. We're gonna be the first graduating class in New Kent, the fully integrated graduating class, and we'd like you to be our graduation speaker. He said, let me check my schedule. Yeah, I think I can do it. It was L. Douglas Wilder. And I said, we're gonna have a valedictorian, salutatorian Black, and you will be the first Black speaker for graduation at New Kent. It was L. Douglas Wilder, of course, the first Black governor. I'll stop now and let Anthony speak. You have one, okay.
Good afternoon. Ooh, that's too much for me. I'm a Green. My name is Anthony Green. I am one of the sons of Dr. Calvin C. Green and Mary Green, plaintiffs of the Green versus New Kent County case. I have many, many stories to tell. And a lot of them were inside of the green home that most people will never hear. But outside of the green home, we were, and my parents were very much involved in, of course, the case itself, but there were other things that were going on in the community as well. My mother, for some of you that did not know, was a teacher at Watkins School, the black school. And that was actually part of the case because she was fired as a threat when my father filed the case. And she was the only person, as I understand, she was the only teacher in New Kent County that was qualified to teach economics at the time, black or white. But she was not allowed to teach at the white school. Matter of fact, no black teacher was allowed to teach at the black school, even during the freedom of choice. During the freedom of choice, which I went the first year, was 65. I was in the 4th grade. I was one of the youngest black children at the school at that time, the first couple of years, actually. Freedom of choice, again, they've talked about it a little bit already, was different in the elementary school than the high school. These two young people here had a different experience than I had.
Thank you for saying
Yeah.
young people.
But I'm still younger. But the elementary, yes, it did have some problems, but did not have as many. And one of the things that I've spoken in many places over the years, and one thing I've seen and learned and experienced is young people, children are taught hate. And it's so obvious. And even at New Kent, when we first started, we did not have in the elementary classes nearly as much problems as the high school students had. Most of us at the elementary level got along pretty well. Again, there were every now and then something might have come up, but again, we were children. So most of those cases were dealt with pretty quickly and calmly. But there were certain things that we still had to be aware of. As she said a minute ago, we were told not to go anywhere by ourselves. And that one of my worst experiences was when I had to go to the restroom and no one was around me, and I went into the restroom by myself, and I was accosted by 3 white boys. And what made that worse was that a teacher came in and the 3 white boys told a lie that I was trying to damage the school or with a, the graffiti or whatever. And the teacher took their side. And I was the one that got punished for it. But again, most of the cases that I've had when I was coming up to New Kent, in terms of the educational part, were good experiences. I think I have a couple classmates that are here, possibly or schoolmates I know that were here when I was going through the elementary all the way through high school. And that was a very good experience because the younger ones, we stayed together through, and we have our 50th anniversary. As a matter of fact, our 50th reunion is next year for my class. I graduated in 1975. So most of us that were together from the early years stayed together. Again, as young people, the issues were not so much as what we saw, or what you might have heard, and what they were in the older groups, on the older ages and the adults. In terms of the community things, and my father was very much involved. As I said, he was the president of the NAACP. He spearheaded the case. And one of the things I also want to state very clearly, I'm very adamant about this, the integration case was not about black or white. It was about right or wrong. The law said something should have happened based on what occurred 10 years, 11, 12 years before. He addressed the issue that it should be changed because the law says it should be changed. So that's what the whole fight was for in terms of our responsibility or their responsibility to follow suit and follow through. And it went all the way through, as we know now, through the Supreme Court, because my father would not stop until it was addressed correctly. And that's the way they taught us, trained us, and brought us up. There's so many things that went on in the community in terms of the young people, how we were prepared. That's one of the things that I still remember. We were really prepared to go into the black students I'm talking about when the schools, freedom of choice and beyond, we were prepared how to respond to different situations, how to respond to the teachers, how to respond to other students. All the teachers did not like us, all the students did not like us. So we had to deal with that in the proper way. I could go on and on, but I want to let the other folks speak and you ask me questions later.
Anthony,
Yes.
if you will, just briefly, could you talk a little bit about your father and why
Mm-hmm.
he chose to pursue the case at the outset? Just a little bit further about your father.
Well, again, there's so many things that went on with my parents. Some of the things I still don't know the whole story, but I know my father was very much involved. Education was part of his life. He was highly educated, and I know he had some experiences that he was discriminated against very much, probably more so than we were when he was coming up through school. He went to Virginia State University, and as well as my mother. I know he wanted to go to some other schools to study medicine and some other things that he was really very much involved with. He was in Korea as a medic. He wanted, one of the things he wanted to do was study medicine. And I know VCU at that time would not accept blacks. And I know that was one of the things that concerned him. And I'll use the word concerned him. Again, he also saw the lack of education and the lack of opportunity. Both of my parents were educators. They saw that there was a lack of resources and things that they needed to teach students so that they could be successful as they were, or they could be. So there were so many things, and I don't know if that answers exactly what you want, so many things that my parents went through that they didn't want us to go through. So I think that was one of the things that kept driving him to make sure that we didn't have to go through the same things that they went through when they were coming up through their programs and studies.
Thank you. Ms. Burrell?
Hi, my name is Betty Burrell. And I started, as was mentioned, in the freedom of choice in the white school. And I was such a nerd that I was just excited to go to school. I was oblivious, as Anthony mentioned, the children learn to hate. My friends were the white kids, you know, Wanda Britt and some of the other kids. We played together. One incident kind of woke me up. One of the kids told me, "Don't you slide behind me." You know the word. But other than that, I mean, Miss Carswell, one of the sweetest humans ever on the planet Earth, was my first grade teacher. Miss Francisco, second grade. Those teachers, I think, were purposely chosen because they were just kind human beings and they treated us all the same. And so my elementary years, I was oblivious to anything. My parents made the choice to send us to the school. It was closer, geographically closer to our home. But I will say, when I got in high school, again, you start learning these behaviors. I didn't want to be a cheerleader, but I tried out for cheering because there were no blacks on the cheering squad. And I tried out for Miss New Kent because never had a black Miss New Kent for the tobacco festival. And I won, to my horror, because you had to wear a swimsuit. And it's like, oh my God, what have I done? And so, and then I became the first countywide, not the first black elected official, first countywide elected official in New Kent, and served for 11 years. So in a very short period of time, I will say New Kent started to change in some of the old ways because the children were learning better, that they had been in class with us and they knew that the things that their parents were saying weren't true. So again, I was oblivious, and I'm grateful to my parents because I learned at an early age, just see people for being people.
Mr. Curle?
Good afternoon. I'm Rusty Curle, and I have a long family connection with New Kent. One of my aunts was in the first graduating class of New Kent. My father graduated from New Kent, and this is in the 30s. My sister graduated as the last class before freedom of choice took place at New Kent. I was at New Kent the only 4 years that freedom of choice was the plan. The year after I graduated was when total integration. I found a letter just by chance the other day because my mother saved everything. And it's the letter that was sent to every family in the county to make your choice, which school, whether you wanted to go to. Our choice could have gone to Watkins or go to New Kent. Of course, I'm sure all the white people chose to go to New Kent.
They did.
And certainly the reason would be for, part of it would be just because that's where you'd always been. Why would you change? A word Betty used perfectly describes my time during the freedom of choice years would be oblivious and naive. During these projects and meetings we've had through Brian's association and Camilla's over the last few years, it's been an eye-opener for me. Things that were going on, and still when I hear them today, it rattles me and shakes me. But as Betty used the adjective oblivious, I was oblivious to those things. I was lucky enough to grow up in a household that taught respect. I was lucky enough when I came back to teach to New Kent to have two principals, one black, one white, Mr. Taylor and Mr. Eagle, that I worked for. And I never had a meeting. I was never told, I was never sat down and given any instructions about race, this, that, or the other. Pertaining to that, problems could be, but they taught through their examples, you're supposed to treat people the right way. And I think that maybe got those type of leaders we had to Betty's, what she said, maybe that helped the healing a little bit. I was lucky enough to play ball with Larry, to have coached Anthony and his brothers. And his father was very kind to me as a young head coach, the way he treated me and talked to me. He sent me letters and different things. There was never any type of idea or presentation from them that I was supposed to do a certain way because I was white and they were black. There wasn't. It was just you were supposed to treat people the right way. They were great leaders, but at that time, naive and oblivious, including the times I was coaching there. There wasn't any. When I was a coach, I was just trying to get the best guys on the field to win. It didn't matter whether they were white, black, or whatever. It didn't matter to me. Again, I guess the two words I would use is naive and oblivious during my time. But I appreciate being a part of it.
Absolutely, thank you. During the period before integration, New Kent had two schools, one for black students, grades 1 through 12, one for white students, grades 1 through 12. Panelists, to your recollection, could you talk a little bit about the differences between the two schools? And also related to that, what were the various reasons that you or your parents had for wanting to integrate or desegregate the schools in the county?
Let me start because they will have better example. This is another thing about being oblivious until we talked with Anthony in different times of knowing that different things are at the different schools. The one thing I did know is we didn't have a gym, and we never had a gym. Larry and I graduated in the gym, but we did not have a gym the whole time we were in school. Y'all all had one, but we never did. Well, one at the black school, one at the white school, one at Watkins or New Kent. We never had that. So we weren't big on facilities regardless, but I've learned from you all later there were differences in what was available.
I think when you look at the resources in the school, the first time I ever had a brand new book was when I went to New Kent. You know, when you open up a brand new book and the pages kind of crackle and you get that new book smell. When we had books, we received our books when the white school sent the books down to us. When you had books that were they finished, they were old books and we got them. So when we got books, there were 10, 12, 15 names that had been scratched out. That's how we got our books. The first time I got a new book was when I went to New Kent. The home economics department, I remember that being just pristine, and all of the supplies and all of the resources there. The biggest difference for me was what we had and what we had to make do with at the Black school versus going to New Kent High School. That was one of the biggest differences for me.
And Mrs. Taylor, if you could comment just briefly about your parents' rationale for desegregation more broadly.
Because it had to be done. I remember crying. There were three of us. My brother is here today. My younger brother is deceased now. My father and mother applied for all three of us to go. Like I said, they accepted more girls than boys. I was the eldest child, so I was accepted, and the girl. But I begged them, please don't do this. Please don't make me go. But my father said, it's going to be hard. It's something that you're going to have to live through. One day you're going to thank us for this, but someone has to step up. Someone has to be the first. And it's going to have to be you. God has a plan, and you're just going to have to do it. But I absolutely hated it. When we would visit my maternal grandmother on Sundays, coming around the curve, going to the school, I would start crying in the car because I knew what would face me on Monday. The first couple of years were really, really bad years. But I'm looking back on it now and I'm glad I did it. But my father just said, you have to do it. Someone has to be the first. Someone has to pave the way. And you and the group of students who are going, you have to do it.
We were specifically trained by Mr. Green, thanks to Anthony's dad. The leaders in the county and the support groups told families that if you had a business in New Kent County, do not, and I repeat, do not send your child. I grew up in the middle of the county between both schools on a little, I would call it a small farm. And the community was equally integrated, 50-50, I guess. And we used to sell corn and hog meat and garden vegetables and all, and people used to come by and buy them and what have you. But when I started and parents said that you had to go to New Kent, all of that stopped immediately because they didn't want to associate in any way, shape, or form. Again, if you had a business in New Kent County, parents that is, do not send your child. The experience that took me for a loop, before the school bus came, Freedom Riders would come with Molotov cocktails. I don't know if everybody know what a Molotov cocktail is. It's a glass bottle filled with gasoline, stuffed with a rag in the top, and they would light it and throw it. And if you didn't get out of the way, dive on the ground and or whatever, it would have been Katie bar the door. It would have been very disastrous. So having an experience like that at 15 and a half years old, I'm saying to myself, you gotta be kidding. But I've often watched in the late 50s and early 60s, what happened down in Selma, Alabama to James Meredith and all those guys. And I'm saying to myself, there's no way in the world that can happen to me. No way in the world. But it hit. I'll give you one dark day I had. April the 5th was a Friday. I was at the water fountain, getting some water, minding my own business. And a group of kids came and said, hey, look, we killed your daddy last night. That's when they assassinated Dr. Martin Luther King. I looked and they say, you're next. What could I do? What could I say? I was just stunned. I said, how can you glorify the murder of a leader in America and laugh and jump around and have fun about it and tell me that I'm next? That was pretty extreme and pretty horrible. It burned down the community center in New Kent County and other burnings. We know exactly who did it because they came back and said, hey, never prosecuted. Nobody spent any time whatsoever. It was funny because the sheriff in the county, he was an alcoholic. He stayed down at my uncle's house about 12 hours a day on the sofa. When you needed him, you had to call my uncle's house, wake him up, give him some water and or whatever, and then he would go and investigate. I mean, I know I'm being a little wordy, but I'm gonna stop in a minute. But that's kind of the way it was during that time frame. It was very, very tough. So when you talk about getting your education, studying, taking tests, the teachers calling you N-word, get your feet out the aisle, N-word. Yeah, that's what you call the name, okay. Get your feet out the aisle, N-word. And I don't care how smart you are, but the best grade you can get out of this class is a C. Say, well, to myself, what's the use in working and studying and doing whatever? But I started out with best in class and best on the field of athletic competition. We rose to that occasion. The guy was the valedictorian in the class. He was the fastest man on the track team. In 1969, we had baseball team, never lost a game. The first time I joined the baseball team, and some of the guys are in here, I can remember like it was yesterday. It was the fifth inning. The score was 11-3. The assistant coach came up and told the head coach, hey, we're gonna lose this game anyway. So let's go ahead and put these N-words in. Let's see what they can do. So the coach said, okay. We went in. We only played 7 innings now. This was the top of the 5th. We lost the game, but the final score, 9-11. You could hear a pin drop. They said, oh my God, these guys are pretty good. Rusty was on the team in our senior year. We never lost a game. I pitched every game. I did have fun at New Kent because I was always into sports. I'm throwing the ball at the house, breaking windows out, getting beaten and all that kind of stuff. We didn't have that opportunity with sports in Georgia. I played intramural basketball, played football, played baseball, the whole works. A lot of our kids in that class, we all went to college, or the military. We all landed wonderful jobs because we were dedicated. We were determined. You're not going to break our spirit. We were bent now, don't get me wrong, but we weren't broken. And I attribute that to the church that we went to, the churches, if you will, the leaders in the county. His father, I was scared of his father because when he spoke, everybody listened.
Amen.
It's as simple as that. But that's what got me through and got us through. And again, you know, dealing with the atrocities of burnings and Molotov cocktails and just the name calling and whatever. It would have broke anybody's spirit. But again, I was bent, but I wasn't broken. Okay.
I was going to add, we were talking about.
If you pull the microphone just a
Oh, a
little.
little bit closer, a little bit. We were talking about resources a minute ago. I was reminded, my mother was, again, she was teaching at Watkins School in home economics, and I know she would always be talking about how there was no equipment to teach with. I think she had like one stove and one sewing machine, and they were already worn out because they came from the white schools. Never had any new equipment to use in anything she taught with, but she made sure that the students, her students, learned the things that they needed to learn. Same thing Linda was saying, yes, textbooks and other resources in the school were limited, if at best, that we had to deal with. And so it was a big difference when we went to New Kent, the white school. Like I said, new books, new equipment, enough equipment for everything and everybody to use and have their own. It was a big challenge, or a big change rather, in terms of what Larry was talking about in terms of sports. That was one of the biggest things I tell my kids when I teach them. It was a blessing for me because at that time, the only sport that they had was baseball, and I couldn't catch a cold. So to be able to play different sports, other sports and other activities was a tremendous blessing for me, and ended up allowing me to play sports and get a college scholarship. And this was one of the schools that wanted me to come play for them. And there's a story behind that. I'm not going to go into that right now, but yeah, there were so many different advantages for us to go to the white school because there was so much difference in terms of the resources or availability for courses, materials, and all the other things. And that was really one of the driving forces I know in those days, is that there was no such thing as equal. There was no such thing. The law said separate but equal. There was no such thing as that. Never was. And that's one of the things that we were definitely driving forces, so that we could have the equal opportunities with equal resources.
Before we open it up to questions from the audience, I wanted to ask if you all had any last remarks in general, or if you wanted to speak anything about the outcomes of desegregation in the county.
We won. And I'm not saying that as a green, I'm saying that as a people. And I'm not just saying it as a Black person, I'm saying it as a people. We won. The things that were people fought for in those years was because people saw that there was a need to give everybody the opportunities that they needed to be successful. No difference of race, sex, or whatever the case might be, everybody should have the opportunity to be successful. And that's one of the things our case was all about, giving everybody the opportunity in an equal playing ground, the same opportunities to be as accepted. And again, we always saw over here, we had valedictorians, we had athletes all over the place, we had all those different areas. But if we had not integrated schools, none of that would have happened. None of that would have happened. And that's one of the things that my father and other people fought for and are still fighting for. And we all should be still fighting. I'm going to preach right now because there's so many things going on in our society.
Yes.
And some of us in here may be blind to some things. We have a problem then.
We did.
Because we have lost. I said we won in 60. We've lost a whole lot of what we won.
Amen.
Because we have been complacent to think that it's somebody else's issue. It's all of our issue. And it's all about responsibility to stand and still hold people accountable, that everybody has the rights that they ought to have, so that everybody has a chance to be as successful as they can possibly be. And if you don't give people that chance or that opportunity, it's your fault.
I just want to say, I don't want us to ever leave this place today without realizing how impactful and important Dr. Green was. He was a gentle giant. The students listened to him, but the adults listened. He had the respect of everyone in that county. And there were others, Nat Lewis, my own daddy, George Holmes,
Yes.
Mr. Travis, Mr. Whiting. I mean, there were, and they trained us, they taught us, they prepared us, and they pushed us. And the teachers, the Black teachers in that county had little or nothing. Mrs. Burrell, Miss Boykins, Miss Carter from Williamsburg, Marjorie Carter. I don't know if any of I have to remember Marjorie Carter, but they had little or nothing, but they always saw greatness in us, and they always pushed us. Integration helped, but I also think, I have to be honest, I think integration also hurt. I really do, because When you are taught by someone who is like you and will not take no for an answer, you're not going to fail in my class. I see greatness in you, and I'm going to do everything that I can to see that you succeed. We didn't get that. And there were some good white teachers in that school. I don't want anyone to leave here without thinking Mr. Rowland and some of the other teachers, Mr. Chaplin and Galloway. They fought for us. And it changed as the years went on. But as a child, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th, do you know how to go in a class year after year after year and not see anyone that looks like you? That is very difficult for a child, but it helped us, but I think it also hurt us in some ways too.
Years ago, we were about 51% African-American in New Kent County. Back during the day of in the mid to late 60s. I think what bridged the gap for me and us doing that desegregation piece was they could see that we were intelligent and talented, because once we demonstrated what we could do educationally and the whole works, things seemed to settle down a little bit as well. It was tough, and it's still tough. Today, when you look at New Kent County, it's a whole different county. I mean, I'm still a landowner in New Kent and have property and houses and what have you. But when you look at the population today in New Kent, we're about 13%. Used to be about 52%. So when you lose that kind of grip of your family legacy and beyond, that's what makes it tough. Now, buy something in New Kent, land, houses, or whatever, you've got to have some serious resources today. I think if I'm correct, it's the second fastest growing county behind Loudoun County. And it's still even we're averaging about 75 to 100 families a month coming into New Kent to live and build and prosper. The school systems are absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So, but to your point, I mean, I think we've lost a lot relative to desegregation. If we could have had the equal resources at Watkins, like they had at New Kent, and I remember the superintendent, I know his name and all, he's gone now, but everything that came into New Kent at the time went straight to New Kent High School. And all of the inferior products, like buses and whatever, I can't tell you how many times the daggone bus broke down, picking us up late or getting us home late. You know, Linda was talking about books, but it was just infrastructure as a whole. It just want books, you know, but when you endure and came through all of that, man, that made you strong. I was strong as an ox, man. I got accepted at Virginia Union University, and that changed my entire complexion of life. I couldn't believe it. I said, what? I'm going to Virginia Union, African-American University. Left there and landed a wonderful career in Altria at Philip Morris. I stayed there all my life. Never had a job other than Altria, 32 and a half years. Never worked anywhere else since, but it's been a great life. But that experience at New Kent High School made me a whole different person, and how I look at race. See, it's only one race, it's the human race. You know, you can break it down by whatever you want to break it down to. It doesn't matter. But when you look at the diversity and equity and inclusion today, it's terrible. I mean, I never thought that in my wildest dreams. I've got 6 grandkids, and I feel so sorry. I will make it. I don't have a problem with that. But my problem now is worrying about the kids and the grandkids. What are they going to do, and how will they survive based on what's going on today?
Mhm.
I'm
Thank you.
sad that my grandchildren may have to fight the same fight that I fought. That is what keeps me up at night. That is what makes me weep. I have three beautiful, wonderful, adorable grandchildren that I would give my life for.
I've got 6.
Yeah, well, I'm not trying to catch up with you. But I thought we were fighting the fight so they wouldn't have to fight the fight. But here we are now having to fight the fight. I have a granddaughter who has less rights than I have. So the fight continues. Sadly, the fight continues.
I'd like to thank all the panelists for being here and sharing their memories. We do have just a few minutes if any audience members would like to ask a question or two.
Right behind you.
Jody, you've got a microphone and I've got one also. We've only got a few minutes,
Yeah.
literally.
Hold on just one second. Mrs. Taylor, before we end, I would love for you to tell the story about you and your cousin in the cafeteria.
Mm.
That's a great story.
Well,
Well,
oh, okay, the cafeteria, Cynthia. We would get together, I'm trying to talk quickly. We would get together and try to strategize what we were going to do to get into the clubs and to get into the different areas in the school. Well, Cynthia and I got together and said, because all the blacks sat at one table. And so we decided that we were going to split up and we were going to sit at each table. So there were probably 12 of us on that group. So during that time for lunch. So we came in, got our food. I sat at a table with whites. They got up. Cynthia sat at a table with whites. They got up. The rest of them, we said, so they ended up standing all around the wall of the cafeteria with their trays and with their brown bags. And then they went to the teachers and said, make them get up. They're sitting at our tables. You can sit anywhere you want, and so can we. We can sit anywhere we want. Now, that wasn't the first year. We were not brave enough and bold enough to do that our first year. It may have been our second and third year. But yeah, they got up from the tables because we sat at the tables with them.
thank you. That is one of my favorite stories of resistance.
Yeah, they got up.
Okay, here you go.
So you actually said something that I've always, in retrospect, looked at, having been a child of the post-integration era. So my first question is for you, Mr. Green, maybe being privy to some of those conversations with your parents and other adults making these decisions. Did they anticipate the negative consequence? Did they anticipate your mother losing her job? Did Watkins close? Because I know in many communities, the Black school would just close after integration. So I just wondered if that was ever part of the conversation. Like, if we do this, all of our educators are going to lose their jobs. And then the follow-up question for the 4 Black panelists, where did your children go to school? Did they go to HBCU? So Mr. Green, your question first.
Okay, the first part of your question in terms of conversation with my parents, go to school. That was the conversation. You are going to school, okay? My parents did not discuss with us all or basically any of the issues that were going on. You got to understand, this generation, this time is a whole lot different than it was 50, 60 years ago. Parents said this, you did that.
That's right.
Period. We did not, I'm still learning a lot of things about the case itself, even today, because my parents did not want us to be involved in terms of in that part of the issue. Our responsibility was to go to school and get our education. Again, both of my parents were educators, so that was number one in their house, in our house, getting an education. My father was the president of the NAACP. He didn't talk about the NAACP at the kitchen table, not with us anyway. He might have shared, I know he shared some things with my mother and then on the phone all night long with everybody else's families. But our responsibility in terms of our home life was to be prepared to go to school. Yes, we knew that there was something going on. Yes, we knew that our parents wanted the best for us. And they were going to do anything and everything that they could so that we could have the best opportunities that we could have as children coming up through school. And they were going to provide for that. I'll give you one very short story. I remember one day I came home, I said, I'm tired of school. I wish my mother would have beaten me that day. But she gave me basically a 5-minute rebuttal of why education was so important. And what I got of it, even to this day, is they were behind us 100%, and they wanted us to be as successful as we could be. And all of my other two brothers and I, we all were very successful because they said, you will be, period. Thank you, sir. And that's the first part. In terms of schooling, and I'll just do mine real quick. I went to VMI. I don't know if anybody have heard of that school. Virginia Military Institute, very interesting. VMI integrated because of the same green case. Because most colleges were just as segregated as most public schools were. And if those of you that do know the history of VMI, it was founded by the South.
That's right.
The Southern Confederacy. And they call themselves, when I went there, the West Point of the South. So I was just as much a new Black student at VMI as I was when I went to New Kent. That's my piece.
Well, I wasn't gonna do that. I went to an HBCU. My brothers went to an HBCU. And my two children also went to an HBCU.
My son went to Deep Run High School in Western Henrico. And he got this way with the high school. He went to Hampton University in technology. Then he went to the Stevens Institute Technology, Hoboken, New Jersey, to get double master's degree.
Thank you to the panel. As a little girl in 7th grade in Great Plains, and my brother at Fort High School the same year. Who was the first Black cadet president?
Yes. Yes.
I don't think people know how many of us there are. I also don't think
Thank you very much. We are unfortunately out of time, and I know that Jody and I have been researching and writing about the green case for some time, so it's not lightly that we make a decision that we need to shut down this panel, but unfortunately we do in the interest of other panels. I and the panelists will be here at the front of the room for just a minute or two, and then we will be out in the hallway. If you have individual questions, please come and speak with us. Thank you all so much.